Welcome. Good morning. We're excited to have Bridget Mearns here today with Coffee with a Candidate to see what her great ideas are and kind of the why she's running for mayor and a little bit of her background and her history. Feel free to turn your camera on if you wish, but you don't have to. We are going to do a little bit of Bridget's going to introduce herself and share some of her personal ideas, and then we're going to jump into the Q&A portion of it. As always, I have a couple questions that I've got on the go, but please feel free to put a question in the chat, and if you'd like me to ask it, I'm more than willing to ask it, but please feel free to ask any and all questions yourself. We like to keep this flowing as much as possible, and we like hearing from people. So funny when you, and I know the internet's been a little crazy this last couple of days, so hopefully things won't be lagging too bad. But good morning. Welcome to those that didn't hear the welcome speech. And Bridget, I'm gonna turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. I see some familiar faces and names, so that's always fun. Maybe one or two I'm not familiar with, but when Cindy asked me, or when I spoke about this with Cindy, about what could be expected, it was a little bit less about, don't talk to us about the issues necessarily, those will come out in questions, but just give us a little bit about yourself. So I thought my introduction would be a little bit about my background that most of you are familiar with, but maybe one or two things you didn't know about me personally. And then I would like to take your questions. I think that's the most valuable part of any conversations that we can have like this, is I want to know what's on your mind. And I want to specifically have you be able to ask me what's on mine. So just a few things. First off, thank you very much, Cindy and the Chamber of Commerce team for this opportunity. And thank you all for being here this morning with me. I was born in Lethbridge. I graduated from CCH and I have a degree from the University of Lethbridge. I also have a master's in business administration and executive management from Royal Roads University. Like many, I left Lethbridge and I have come and gone a few times throughout my life. But in 2005 is when I came back to stay for good, because I love this city. It has always drawn me back, and now I'm here. And since I've been back, I've worked for Exhibition Park on the redevelopment project and kept that project on the radar. And I'm so pleased now to see that it is funding and moving forward. I have always been its champion, and I firmly believe that it will be a game changer for our city and an economic driver, not just during construction, but post, and that's going to see dividends well into the future. I served 2 terms on City Council from 2010 to 2017, and championed and moved a number of initiatives forward from that seat. I'm now the executive officer of the Building Industry and Land Development Association of Lethbridge Region, which is the membership association of Lethbridge, of builders and land developers and all of the support businesses in the residential construction industry. The residential construction industry is one of the largest in our region, with 3,153 on-site, off-site jobs and millions of dollars. That means in wages across, and millions of dollars in investment into our city. Maybe a few things you didn't know about me on a more personal level. I lived on a boat for 5 years in the Caribbean and the Mediterranean. I've lived in 9 cities as an adult in Alberta, BC, Ontario, and Quebec. I went to university in France and was a nanny for a Honda race car driver. I'm a certified level 2 curling game umpire and a certified club coach. I'm also the 2019 Women's League Curling Champion in Lethbridge, and haven't yet had a chance to defend my title because of COVID, but can't wait to do that. I've also been a curling official for local, provincial, national, and international curling events for men's and women's and mixed doubles. And I'm also the officiating chair for the upcoming Briar in Lethbridge. One thing that kept me up at night while I was doing the world's men's curling, I was the timeskeeper for the men's world's game between Scotland's Bruce Mowat and Canada's Kevin Cooey when it came down to 5 seconds left on the clock. That was probably the most stressful time in my whole curling official career, as you can imagine, but it was something I'll never forget. So those are a few things I thought you might not know about me that would be interesting for you to have on my background. Why I'm running, in 2017, when I left City Council, I left to be able to finish off my MBA for one, and I wanted to go back and get some professional development experience in a different area. And I've done that through Exhibition Park and moving that project, but also with the building industry and land development and being a part of this industry, which has been a massive education and something that I think is extremely important, an experience that I'll bring as mayor, considering it's the closest industry I think the city has with private investors. Over the last number of months, people have been asking me to run. And to be candid, at the beginning, I said I wouldn't want to. I had dismissed it. And then I kept getting asked. And then I considered city council. And then I thought about that. And I've done 2 terms on city council. And now's the time that I lead. People have asked me to look at it. I looked at what I have to offer. I look at the experience and what I've accomplished. And I firmly believe now is the time for me to lead the city. So that is what was the final push for me to put my name forward. As far as just briefly about what I'm feeling the business community is going to be needing moving forward, there's a number of things. One, obviously, we're not out of COVID. We're going to see the impact of this for quite some time moving forward. We're seeing it in disruptive supply chains. We're going to continue to see it in labor shortages. We're going to continue to see it in rising costs. The uncertainty itself of COVID is going to be something we're going to have to manage. I think we're going into a very difficult time for business. As a municipality, we're going to have to continue to look at the red tape issues that affect or create barriers to growth. We're going to continue to have to work with our business community to hear and know from them what they're going to need, including working with other orders of government to ensure that Lethbridge is getting the funding and services that they need. One of the other things that we need to consider for our business community is the reputation of our city. We should not be defined by the issues that we're dealing with, but rather by the incredible, amazing things we have in our city. Our world-class post-secondary institutions, we have amazing amenities and natural resources and parks. We have resilient and creative businesses. We have amazing people. We can afford a house, which is hugely important to many people who are considering moving to anywhere. These are all quality of life issues that a municipality are going to have to continue to invest in to attract business and retain those graduates from university. We've lost 30 to 40 doctors in our city. That's had a massive disruption. In order for us to maintain or even bring doctors to our city, it's going to be quality of life. So we're going to have to continue to make sure that we're focusing on those because that has a massive impact on businesses. So there's a lot of stuff I've just thrown at you, but I do want to hear from you. And so I would like to open up the floor to hear your comments and any questions you have.
Thank you, Bridget. I really think that is cool that you spent 5 years on a boat in the Caribbean. Like that would have been amazing. Now you brought up a lot of different things, and I was writing as we were going, and I'm so glad you brought up red tape, because you and I have had a lot of conversations on this area. And I know that there's been a couple of our members go through some bylaw challenges on getting their business moving forward. Andrea being one of them. So how can you see that, how can we improve that? Or what would be some of the first things that we would look at? Or how could we, as the business community, help council work through some of that heavy lifting of bylaw cleanup, if you want to call it that?
Yeah, and there is, at least from the land development and home building industry, bylaw, specifically the land use bylaw, and all of the policies in the MDP have been massive. But the way that council can be effective, the way that a mayor can be effective is obviously reaching out to you and you reaching out to us to let us know where those barriers are. Without you communicating and us communicating back, we can't resolve something. So just a tiny example of recently, one of our members came to me explaining that they have to print out all of the plans on a house for the inspector. The inspector no longer needs that printout. They have it on their laptop. So just up even simple things like, oh, why are we doing that? Simple call, that's now not a requirement. That's just a tiny example, but those are the things where you communicate what you need. We look at what the problem is and we solve it.
Right, perfect. So kind of bringing it into this next computerized era, so to speak. Because it's interesting. Because we have both talked about, you know, I know there's a couple government programs still ran on DOS systems, but we need to update from DOS to something a little more current. So thank you.
I think there's a kind of a part two to that as well. I think corporate culture, and we are starting to see a change in that. I speak a lot to the city manager about that. Is how we can have a relationship, or how city administration has a relationship with the community, where it's a how can we do it versus a no, we can't do it. And I do start to see a bit of a culture shift in that direction that I'm optimistic about.
Excellent, thank you. Now, Andrea says that she has a couple questions. So Andrea, I'll let you unmute and please ask away.
Hi, nice to meet you. So I have as Cindy mentioned, we went through some red tape with parking minimums, and there have been, so Edmonton has abolished parking minimums as well as Vancouver. And I'm not sure how familiar you are with those requirements and how kind of ridiculous the categories are depending on what kind of business you are. And as a gymnastics club, we fall into gym rather than sports, which is what we are. And we had one heck of a time trying to get our expansion. And in that, we only got 5 years. So we only got a 5-year extension. So that means in 5 years, depending who is on that board, when we go back and ask for more time, we could possibly have that taken away. So I'm not sure what would happen in that situation. So my first question is parking minimums. How do you see that going, and where Lethbridge is headed with that? And I know I am not the only business that has had challenges with that.
So there has been actually quite a bit of conversation around that, and they're looking at reducing parking minimums, but they're just looking at the warehouse district. But there is, I'm certainly aware of what's happening in Edmonton. I'm not aware of Vancouver. The idea is, and I think there is a movement towards this, that businesses should decide what their parking minimums need to be in order to address their clientele. I think that's going to be a tricky thing to move to, but what I'm hearing is there is a movement towards that. And same with the residential minimums as well. But when you're building something or you're a business, you're going to need you need to understand what kind of parking you need. And that should dictate the parking, not an arbitrary minimum.
Okay. And my second question is, I know there's been a lot of discussion with another particular candidate about, oh my gosh, I can't even remember what it's called, conversion therapy. And
oh, yeah.
And what that, you know, if Lethbridge should decide that it is banning conversion therapy, and if it is on board with that, and I am just wondering your thoughts.
Absolutely, there should be a ban on conversion therapy.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Now I see Canute, we got him on the line. He says, very happy to see you running for mayor, Bridget. I know you are running on this, but please explain why it is important for municipal politics to be non-partisan.
So this is a fabulous question. an extremely important question. And on a personal level, this is one of the reasons I like this level of government or this order of government. Issues that become in front of you, the sole motivation for any issue should be what brings Lethbridge forward and what is in the best interest of Lethbridge today and Lethbridge tomorrow. I don't know that you can do that if you're entrenched in any one party ideology, or if you bring any bias to that decision. We all bring biases, I recognize that, but the importance is that you really are tackling an issue with the information you have. And frankly, that's what I like about this order of government, is you're really making decisions on critical thinking, on data, and really what's best in the best interest of the city. The other reason that's important is when you have intergovernmental networks and relationships, it's extremely important that you're able to deal with provincial and federal orders of government successfully. And once you start bringing in political ideologies into it, probably not the right word, but what you can end up doing is damaging that relationship. And you need to be able to work with any government, regardless of what party is leading it. And that comes from a place of knowing that you're putting Lethbridge first.
Now, with the thoughts of, I like it, what brings Lethbridge forward. I like that kind of language. So what do you see as the greatest opportunities for business growth and expansion in our region?
So one right off the top that's obvious to me is the investment made at Exhibition Park. So here's the opportunity to invest in not just conferences and conventions, which are also important, but the ag tech and agricultural industry. But tourism obviously is hand in hand with that. We're putting a lot of investment into the airport, which will also drive some, make that investment even better, but that's a large investment we need to support. The tech industry is one that we're seeing move along that also needs some support and investment. So I think those are three areas that we really have some opportunity.
What about broadband?
I think we're making some inroads there, but you're right. Yeah, absolutely. That's been an issue and a concern, I think, across the province and certainly in our city.
Perfect. I like that that's on your radar, because it's one of the things that many of our businesses throughout, depending on where you are, do struggle with some of the challenges with that.
In this day and age, you can't.
And you can't. We need to be able to do this kind of thing. I have Jeff here. He says, Ms. Mearns, I have the pleasure to see you work through the municipal development plan with Build and gained respect for you through that process. Thank you. I have two comments related to the NDP that I wish to hear your response. One is the apparent expansion of city services and scope, and two, the apparent disregard for public input in the process.
Yes. Well, I would like a little more information on number one, but number two, the MDP process was incredibly flawed. And this, in my mind, was a failure of leadership. And it does not fall squarely on administration. This was a council decision that the master plans be reviewed. Those master plans, administration create policies. Those policies then come back to city council at first reading. So that in itself, and I know I'm getting geeked out on process here, but it's important because there was no opportunity for those master plans and those policies to be then vetted again in the community. It went right to first reading, which means it had to go to a public hearing. Going to a public hearing meant it limited public interaction to 5 minutes. The process was completely flawed. And when you have a document as important and far reaching as the MDP, not to reach back is a failure in my mind.
Now,
and
Jeff did volunteer to unmute and clarify the number one. So Jeff?
Yeah, thanks very much, Bridget, and thanks for appearing here with us today. I guess the previous MDP document was, 80 or 90 pages. The one that council had approved was 321 pages. And in it, there seems to be what would seem to be a very large expansion from everything from bike paths to services to, what people think the city of Lethbridge is. I won't say anything more than that, but it's also reflected also in the capital improvement program, which was a massive approval of $600 some odd million worth of construction. So maybe all that together, if that's clear enough, I'll let you speak.
So the MDP was based on those master plans. I think where the flaw comes in for me is those trade-offs when those 181 policies were developed. The trade-offs to make those policies were made not by the people who need to be making them, which was City Council. They were made internally. And that I think is problematic. As far as the expansion on things, so the capital improvement plan is a 20-year document. Only the first 4 years is funded. And I think yesterday they were looking at reevaluating and aligning the operating budget with the capital budget so that every 2 years that realignment happens and they can look at those projects. There are a number of things that the industry, at least from the development and land development industry, looking at is what you talked about increasing infrastructure. And that is a concern that we've seen through the industry over the last number of years and something that we're trying to address. And I think we can still address it within the MDP. I think we've managed to make enough changes to it where we can start to have those conversations about how do we put in bike lanes efficiently so that we're using land efficiently and that we're using them where people want to have them and where they make sense to have them. Not just that, we're looking at, so the other thing that was in there, tying it back to our industry, and sorry to babble on here, but it's a good example of land use, is roundabouts and size of arterial roads. So the transportation master plan, before we had it amended, was looking to put roundabouts, increase the number of roundabouts. Well, obviously that increases the amount of infrastructure the city has to maintain over time. So making sure that we're having the conversations that look at the cost of benefits of every decision that's made. And I think that's been lacking in the past. And that's something that we owe it to the citizens of Lethbridge and taxpayers to do, is when something is coming forward, that we evaluate it from a cost benefits analysis. It may be more expensive and that may be acceptable if it's a level of service that the citizens want. But that trade-off has to be understood. It may not be worth it. So I don't know if that answered your question. That was a pretty long about answer.
Yeah, that's great. Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. I'm going to kind of combine Andrea and Ken's question together, if that's okay, because they're kind of addressing the same issue. You mentioned the reputation of the city as being important to attract and retain business. We seem to be well known in the province and even nationally for social problems, homelessness, addiction, crime, and then that was kind of where I could link in the safe consumption site. At the municipal level, this has been divisive for our community. How will you lead council through these challenges? So one of the reasons that I wanted to run was because of that divisiveness. It was difficult for me, especially someone who spent 7 years on council trying to move our city forward and unite our city on things, to see members of our community protest each other over whether or not there should be a supervised consumption site. When the conversation really needs to be around how do we deal with the social issues in our community as a whole? How are we dealing with homelessness? How are we dealing with mental health issues? How are we dealing with the drug crisis? What are the gaps in our community? But how are we doing it together? When you piecemeal things out and then put a wedge in things and create that divisiveness in council and in our community, we're not going to be able to solve anything.
So as the leader and as the mayor, it is the responsibility to make sure that we're bringing a united message to our community. We have a united focus on council. And it doesn't become a political issue or a wedge issue. It becomes something we need to tackle together. Some of the things around some of the gaps that I've seen, and I've talked about this before, I do think the community well-being and safety strategy is a good start. It's identified some of where those gaps are. It's bringing the people together. One of the things, the big gaps I see is day services or day programming. I did have the opportunity to tour the Calgary Drop-In Center and take a look at what they've done. Over the last 2 years, they've managed to house 1,400 people. They offer them showers and laundry area to be a community within that community, whether you're at the recovery stage or not, which means they're meeting them where they are, and they're giving them opportunity and dignity, frankly. And being able to work with our business community and our citizens to make sure that everything is being addressed together and not piecemealed. So that was a turning point for me, recognizing where we needed to have better leadership than that. That's not to say that council will always agree on everything. In fact, it's good that they don't, which is the second part of being able to move things forward in the city. Is having debate. Having robust debate is important, and having accurate information is important, but understanding and agreeing on a transparent process so that when the decision is made, it's made and you move on. And that's incredibly important to move forward. I firmly believe with good process comes good outcome.
Thank you, Bridget. And one of the key, because I've been finding with working within some of these committees, is that accurate information and timely delivery of accurate information is important. Tony, I'm going to get to your question because I'm going to lump the two of them together. But I'm going to first let Sandra unmute and ask her questions, and then I'll jump into yours, Tony.
Thanks, Cindy. Thanks very much, Bridget, for being here for this. You may have heard that as part of Alberta 2030, which is the post-secondary strategy that the province is moving forward with, is that work integrated learning opportunities for students are very important, and really is the one metric that post-secondaries in Alberta have for their performance-based funding. Considering the city is a huge employer, with so many departments that align with programs that not only the college but the university offer, would you be willing to form an agreement with the two post-secondaries in town for the city to provide work integrated learning opportunities for our students?
I can't imagine why not. That makes a whole lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
I don't know that the only thing would be whether or not that's something that a mayor can do on its own. Obviously not.
Right.
But it makes 100% sense to me.
Yeah. We've had some of those conversations with the city, but I think because of a lack of a formal agreement, they haven't come to fruition. So I would welcome the opportunity to discuss that opportunity.
Absolutely, 100%.
Great. Thanks, Bridget.
And there's so much potential with, that partnership between, we're fortunate. We have two WIL students right now, one through the college and one through the university. And I can't tell you how engaged those students are and how willing they are to jump in and be involved. So I think that would be an extremely important relationship to build. So thank you.
That just reminded me, so I sit on the community design committee with the city on behalf of Build, and we've had conversations about how to bring in students when we're problem solving.
Yeah.
So make it, and they come up with amazing ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it makes perfect sense.
Good, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to jump to Tony's question, and it was good because he's actually hit on one of the things that I was going to ask too, but I'll start with the first one. He says, hi, Bridget. Congrats on jumping into the race for mayor. Question, it has been noted that Lethbridge has one of the highest residential tax tax rates in the province. How would you address this and mitigate further tax increases?
So this is a good question, and the Building Industry and Land Development Association under CHBA had commissioned a report that we brought forward to City Council, and it was a benchmarking report that did indicate that the, among other things, but the tax rate in Lethbridge is the second highest after Grand Prairie. So there's what people were feeling and hearing. We provided the information to show that was the case. It's not always easy to compare apples to apples, but at least it was a report that got the conversation going regarding the KPMG operational review, which the city has now been using to reorganize. And it was the information that led them to the 61 people being laid off. It's important to note here that this is a difficult thing to do for an organization, this type of change. These are jobs and these are people, but it was an important thing that the city needed to do. I'm optimistic with my conversations with the city manager and the reorganization that they're doing now. I think they're on the right track to mitigate those tax increases and to look at value. Often when people talk about something being too high in cost, it's because they're seeing the value for it. So making sure that we're continually providing the value for your tax dollars and communicating where that's going and being very mindful, especially now, on the ability for people to pay those increasing taxes. So continuing to look for those efficiencies, continuing to look at how the reorganization is working and evaluating like any business would do. It's important that the city do that too. Did that answer your question, Tony?
Yes, thank you, Bridget. I had to find my mute button.
So I'll jump into the second one, and also your view on the private sector providing services that the city of Lethbridge is currently doing. So, kind of that challenge of competing with private business in areas like sidewalk, construction, maintenance, even food concession at NMAX paving, curbside, recycling, all those sort of things. And there's other examples we could throw out there, but what is your idea on the competing with private industry?
Well, I think on general, I do understand that concept that if private industry can do it and they can do it effectively and can do it for our citizens, that's ideal. Having said that, I think there are services that are collective services that, and that's the point of a municipality, is to provide those collective services that that all the community benefit from. Investing public money into private is something that I think we have to keep an eye on. I'm not aware of too many services now where the city is providing it that the private industry can. Do you have any examples specifically that you're concerned with?
Are you posing that question to me, Bridget?
Probably, yeah, Tony, for sure, if you've got an answer, or Cindy, because she asked it.
Yeah, Cindy, if you want to elaborate on that. I mean, I take a look at the number of, let's be honest, the number of city vehicles that are out there and driving F2500 four-wheel drives with 4 people in them, and the private sector doesn't do that. And I see a lot of that in the city. I think there's a lot of, in my opinion, a lot of waste. And I'm just wondering, recently there were some comments about reduction in the parks and how that was going to affect the aesthetics of our parks. And you talk about what's happening up in Black Wolf in the park there and the residents having to take care of the park. To me, I think it's something that the private sector could do better. Just my opinion.
Well, and I would think a lot of it, that we hear, it's around kind of the land development, the city being a very large landowner, and then some of that trickiness that happens within that system. But, I think using our parks is a perfect example. If the city can't keep up, or if there's a need, then wouldn't that be a good opportunity to form strong partnerships with the private sector?
For sure. And I think there's also an opportunity to form partnerships with the community. So there's community associations, and I think there's opportunity for citizens to also take pride in their community. So some of those community gateways that are no longer in the developers realm, they've handed them over to the city. Are there opportunities to partner with community associations? And all of us take some ownership and pride in that. So it's not always financial. There may be opportunities where we can come together as a city.
So creating more positive community relations as well.
I think there's great opportunity there.
Hey, I just want to, so Shelby has a response. Great answer, how to deal with folks with difficult mental health and addiction problems. Not sure any child born some 20 years ago plus that their family envisioned that child would have such a life, especially on the streets. I really like the open and public dialogue session, sharing a view on better ways of working together to help people in need. So again, kind of that, how can the community work together, and how can we listen to each other in a more proactive type way? And Jeff said the city is paying for a restaurant for the SAG, as in probably that example of the private public. Talking about, and I was going to ask you kind of what your top 3 priorities are, but we'll get there in a second, because I know some people, the bridge is a big discussion. What is your view on building a 3rd bridge in Lethbridge?
So this is a really interesting one for our community as well. There's certainly many on the west side who say, nope, don't need it at all, that this isn't something we need. And then there are some who are absolutely, this is something we can't live without. I'm happy to see that it's a question on the ballot. And I'm happy to see, most of all, that there's information that's coming with it, because I think that's important. If we're going to have any dialogue about this, we need to know what are the costs of it. What are the traffic impact assessments saying? Really, what is the impact of a 3rd bridge? I think once that information is known, then we can have a real discussion about what does it mean to have a 3rd bridge.
Perfect. And I think, like you said, having it at the belt, like right on there, let's see what people are thinking as a whole.
Yeah, and let's, for me, it's about making sure that people are having that conversation from a place of knowledge.
Right, correct. So like I said, like that sharing of accurate current information. So we know, and and sometimes, communication is key, right? And there's different groups working on different projects, and just maybe finding that portal so we can find out who's doing what, so we're not overlapping, and we can do more collaborative problem solving. Use some of those critical thinking skills that you had suggested earlier. So we're at about that 10:40 mark. So I really want to top 3 priorities, and because we are the chamber, and we are, we're here to really help support businesses throughout our community. So how would your top 3 priorities, how do you see that link into some of the work that we're doing at the chamber, or even suggest how we could do better, or what do we need to do to help our voice be heard a little more clear, accurate, and get some of those relationships stronger?
Well, my top priority was not going to be surprising. I think it's everyone's top priority, and that's the social issues that are facing our city and community safety. I've talked a bit about that already. I think until we're dealing with that in a collaborative way, and we're moving forward, and we have a focus to work and provide some compassion and dignity in that area, I think we will continue to suffer as a city and our reputation as well. How And taxes obviously is one of them. Again, I've talked about value, recognizing that the citizens are concerned about their tax level. I'm optimistic we're seeing some things there, but we have to continue to invest in those things that bring economic development to our city and quality of life. I've talked about the importance of that in retaining businesses, but also attracting businesses and keeping our graduates in our city. How the chamber plays a role. You have a large membership of businesses and access to great information. So what would be helpful from a mayor's perspective is getting ahead of some of those issues, bridging those lines of communication so that it's proactive and information that can be used at the time of a decision, because businesses really obviously are the backbone to our community and our employers, and their health is extremely important to the city as a whole. So anything that can provide better information and data to council as they move forward facing some of these issues is helpful.
Perfect, thank you.
And the chamber has done that on many occasions.
Thank you. Well, and and that's like you had mentioned, some of the strong, like building those relationships with the city manager. Remember that there's the city manager piece of it, and then the council piece of it, and then helping communicate to both sides of that is really important. And like Ken had said, I think we may have missed a tremendous opportunity to market our city as a city of bridges and build them physically and metaphorically everywhere we can in the city. So let's build as many as we can, as often as we can. And those bridges are so important. And we're seeing that, like we can even, the bridge between, the college and the university students to the business, and those type of bridges are just as important as the physical bridge. So I think that it's encouraging to hear more people talk about that and work together as a team. Collaboration is key, and you've used that word quite a few times, so thank you. And Shelby, yes, we have so many bright minds in this city. We're very, very lucky. Let's see. Is there anybody else? We've talked, our agricultural food hub and that kind of, where do you see that all fitting into, even though that's counting larger, the city of Lethbridge does rely on that partnership and those people. How do you see maybe working with that relationship a little stronger?
With the county?
Yes.
Specifically, yeah. I think that's key. I think that's really important. We are a regional area. We are a regional hub. Without naming names, I have had a member of the county reach out to me and say that they were excited because they do feel there needs to be more collaboration. When I was on council, I worked on the intermunicipal development plan. And so I saw some of the areas that were tricky, but we are stronger together. We are a hub. And I think there's opportunities there for us to be working together on a number of issues.
Great. And then if we could tie it back even to Exhibition Park, because it's nice to hear positivity around that development and your enthusiasm towards it, because I do, I recognize the work that you did put into that. So how could the city really amp that up and really get that knowing and make those, make that connection between, show that not only the economic development prosperity of it, but also on like some of the opportunities with, let's say, the college and the culinary program or those kind of things. Like where do you see the most positive energy out of that project?
From a municipal perspective, I think they did have access to grants, which I think was important for capital, extremely important. It needed the political will municipally and provincially for that to move forward. That kind of political will to support it down the road is going to be important. Investing in areas of tourism, but also ag that we've talked about. So looking at Tourism Lethbridge making sure that our message is getting out there. And again, our message is so much more than what people will Google and see. It's an amazing city that we have. So all of that helps to support what's happening at Exhibition Park. They're doing an awesome job under Mike to make those connections with the college and the university, to reach out into the region to see how they can be more successful and strong. I'm optimistic that they're doing the right thing. The role of the municipal government is to using bridges, the ability to bridge them anywhere that they need to be stronger.
So it's interesting because, you know, a lot of the conversations are, you know, around is that partisan kind of all of that stuff, but, you know, that the political will. So understanding what the political will of the municipality is and how we need to work then with the political will of the province and then the feds. So tying those together, so building those strong bridges from the city of Lethbridge, say up to Edmonton, and then out to Ottawa. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, I think that's we've seen some good example of that. I mean, Exhibition Park and the funding is a really good example there. When I think of it from the industry that I'm in, so there's a number of things. So on the federal front, affordability is obviously affordable of ownership, but ownership also affects the entire housing continuum. 80% of rental units become available because people move to ownership. If there's no supply, there's nowhere for them to go, things go through the roof. So ownership is a key component for the housing continuum, but it's also a key component because this is how Canadians build wealth. So at a federal level, we're working on 30-year amortization. We're working on mortgage stress test. We're working on how can we assist first-time home buyers. Those are things that we're working federally and have success with, because when we speak, they're listening. We're experts in the industry. That would be the same as being the mayor of a city. You're expert for your city. And what you're bringing forward is not political based. It's being the expert for your city. Provincially, obviously there's a ton of crossover. Social services and social issues are one of the biggest things, knowing that we don't have the support services or the funding in place that we should and deserve. So making sure that we're creating those networks to access what we deserve.
Perfect. Expert of your city. I like that's a neat way to phrase that. I have a question here. I've got a couple, but I'm going to jump to one, then I'll finish with another. What's your position on funding EDL?
So I've had a conversation around EDL and how Opportunity Lethbridge is going to work. So
Okay.
As Opportunity Lethbridge, for those who don't know, this is now it's a new thing, and it falls under Lisa Trent as the Director of Corporate and Community Services. And so does Lethbridge Land, and so does the airport. So this is sort of this broader department that they're building, where EDL would fall in. And as I understand, EDL would play the role of matchmaker, where the city would close the deal. And we have seen this work with Cavendish, and we've seen this work with other things. As I understand that role, that does make sense to me. Because the city is the one who makes final decisions on many things. So having someone that would bring them in, go out and talk to the message of Lethbridge, go out and sell what we offer and all of the amazing things we have, bring them in, and then have the city sort of be the closer, does make sense.
Okay. Thank you for that. And then your views on building up rather than out.
So everyone, I mean, this is a big thing that cities are facing everywhere, is the amount of infrastructure that they have. And the more you move out, the more costly it is to put that infrastructure in. That being said, it's extremely important for people to have choice. So up and out is fine and important. What's important is that we're using land efficiently, so that we're providing opportunity, but we're also making sure we're building in a way that's sustainable and responsible. So I had used the example of roundabouts. I used the example of the size of our arterial roads. There's some examples where design standard has a direct effect on how much land is left for people to live on, and then how do you provide the choices that you need. We need all of it. People want single family house, and people want affordable condos and apartments and duplexes. There needs to be a variety. The importance is that we're using land the most efficient so that we can affect those. One of the things that came up in the MDP was increased density, which is absolutely possible to do, especially as things become less affordable. People are looking for options that are duplexes, or they're looking for secondary suite opportunities. So all of that's important. But again, going back to making sure we're using land efficiently. So an example of an arterial road is, if we were to narrow that down, it would be 122 new lots. So same land base, but we could get more people on it with a larger variety of housing. So these are things that we have to look at and own as a municipality.
And I guess when you talk about that, increase that density, and where would you like, we have some neighborhoods that, you know, do we put certain things in certain neighborhoods, or do we demolish a building or a couple buildings and put more up than out? Looking at some of those land bylaw use and such, how as a council and how as a city do you work through some of those hot button topics?
So the redevelopment plans are where you're going to see those coming to play. But the land use bylaw, phase 3, is looking all of those residential zoning. And I think that's important for a number of reasons. It does, going to developments that are developed, those are redevelopment plans, and they are looking at those. And so there's a number of considerations. One is what infrastructure is available. Even if you wanted to put a high rise there, is there the infrastructure capacity to do that? And then what would it cost to have or put in the infrastructure that's necessary to do that? So there's a number of factors when you start looking at densifying in existing areas. But when you're looking at new developments, this is where the land use bylaw and residential zoning will play a part. We have, as an industry, has encouraged for more affordability and more options, secondary suites. So wanting to see those more available than they have in the past. And we've been successful in changing some land use in that area. So there's a great role that we can play.
Perfect. And it's great to hear you, like, your passion behind that, and your understanding of that system. Like, I think that that is, thank you for the work that you've done on that. We're at 10:55. Let me, I guess the final thing I could say is, our downtown, getting it vibrant and getting it alive. There's so much talk about downtown and getting people back downtown. What are your thoughts on that?
I love downtown. I spend a lot of time there. I love the owl. That's probably giving away a few things about me. But I also recognize the challenge. I'm alive to the challenges that they're facing. And again, some of this goes back to social issues and homelessness, providing dignity for everybody, the businesses, as well as the vulnerable population, coming together to find a solution for this. But I think downtown can be vibrant as we get the initiatives to build housing there is important, and those continue. But I recognize that there's a real challenge and a real stigma that we're going to have to address and move forward. And I believe we can.
What do you find most positive about our city? What's your star of the city?
When I think of Lethbridge, I guess I think of its physical beauty as much as anything. So our coulees, our parks, our opportunity, our trails, so much we have to offer from just a physical perspective and a beauty perspective. But also being in this industry as long as I have, I'm incredibly proud of how resilient our businesses are and how collaborative they are. And Team Lethbridge is a really great example of that, even though those are organizations. We are a pretty awesome group of people who work together to find solutions. And that's what I want to continue to foster and grow within us.
Perfect. Thank you very much. If there's any other questions, I'll leave it open for about a minute or two. Any final thoughts, Bridget, or anything you wanted to close on?
Well, just, thank you again. Thank you again for the opportunity. Thank you, all of you, for taking your time this morning and spending it with me. We're just under 2 weeks away from the election. So I'm sure there'll be a lot more conversation on all of these issues. But thank you for giving me the opportunity to get to know me a little bit better on a less formalized way. And I appreciate you asking your questions. And thank you, Cindy and the Chamber team for putting this together.
Thank you. And we are hosting our the Municipal Forum on September 27th in the evening at Yates. We're also holding a federal one on, I believe it is the 16th that we set the date, September 16th. We have a full schedule for this next month. September and October are going to be hopping months, but we are really excited to offer these opportunities, and please do not hesitate to reach out. The Chamber is going to be putting our platform together soon with the questions that we're going to be submitting and trying to get more of these answers, but these coffee chats have been very, very useful, and just kind of being able to spend some time with each other in a not so formal way. So yes, Nika has put the calendar of events in the chat line. Please don't hesitate to take a look. We have our chair and volunteer reception in September as well. It's lots of creative things we're doing out there in this business world. So thank you very much. Have a wonderful rest of your day. It's a Wednesday, peak performance day. Have a wonderful, don't forget to vote. We'll have more conversations about that. Thank you, everybody.